As fans of both Zelda and Pokémon, I've longed for a crossover, and you know what? It's happening with the release of Scarlet and Violet. Gamefreak announced a new Pokémon that is basically a copy of the popular Zelda mini-boss. Ceruledge is a ghostly warrior draped in purple that wields two flaming swords. There's no way this wasn't inspired by the Gyromaster from Majora's Mask. So that got me thinking, what other Zelda enemies would make for great Pokémon in Scarlet and Violet? Well, staying with Majora's Mask, let's look at 5 other creatures that could find themselves in the upcoming Paldea region. Skeleton-based enemies are in almost every Zelda game, yet we don't have a true skeleton Pokémon. Sure, we've got the Dusknoir line, but all we see is the skull. Where's the rest of that bony body? That's where the Stall children would make a perfect acquisition to the Pokémon roster. Its small stature and lovable giant head would win the hearts of anyone with an affliction for death, punk, or spirituality. In Majora's Mask, Stall children linger in the graveyard having a great time, and I envision them being in the graveyard or mourning area of the Paldea region. Being the undead, they must be part ghost type, but there are a few candidates for what the secondary typing could be. Grass and ground could work given their connection to being buried underground, as would dark for the generally mischievous nature. But ultimately, the fighting type works best, to honour its past battles in the Great War of Ikana. Currently, the only ghost fighting type we have is Marshadow, so this would give the Stall child a unique typing amongst non-legendary Pokemon. As for its stats, I'd give it a good physical attack, but wouldn't make this creature too strong. I'd rather let it evolve into one of the many larger skeletal enemies in the series where it can achieve its full potential. Speaking of evolving, why not help this channel grow by hitting subscribe, giving this video a like, and sharing with a friend. It all really helps. The Peahats are scary enemies that look like giant pineapples with sharp, swirly blades underneath. Compared to Link, they are giant, and I think we need a few more excessively large Pokemon in the game. The Peahat have some resemblance to the Simperium vincentii, which is a succulent native to Spain and Portugal. These creatures could find themselves in multiple locations throughout the game, acting as a solid ace for a nature-based trainer. The typing picks itself, with grass to signify the plant, and still representing those large blades. As the Peahat can hover around, I could see it gaining the levitate ability alongside some useful flying type attacks. Its stat distribution would lean into a very slow but heavy hitting physical attacker with a very solid HP and defense stat. There's also the Peahat Larvae, which could act as a pre-evolution, but I do like the idea of having a single stage Pokemon. It's hard to believe we've got over 1,000 Pokemon and no snowmen. Unless you count Zen Mode Galarian Domenitan, but let's be real, most of you probably forgot that existed. That's why we need Eno as a new Pokemon. It's a simple, possessed snowman that hurls snowballs. What's not to love? With Eno being a rather plain design, there's plenty of room for developers to add some interesting lore. Perhaps these creatures scare children in the snowy mountains, or maybe they bring fun and happiness to those around them. Whichever path is chosen, the Eno is sure to sell merchandise come the winter months. Unless there's some outrageous backstory added, the Eno would be a single type ice Pokemon, and that works perfectly fine. I don't see them being overly competitive creatures, having a rather mediocre but even stat distribution, with its highest stat being its special defenses. Every region needs its own bug Pokemon, and who better to fill that role than the Hiploop? These insect-like creatures often wear a metal mask that bolsters their defenses. They're quick, agile, and can pack a punch. For the Paldea region, I can see them being found in the mid-game, like a Heracross or a Pinsir from the first few generations. But rather than being the good guy, the Hiploop would be a sinister Pokemon. I'd give it a backstory of being mischievous and make it a staple Pokemon of the new evil team. Having these insects as bug dark type gives them unique typing whilst leaning into its personality. Given it's got a metal face shield, I would give it a stronger physical defense stat than most bugs, but its speed and attack would still be its best attributes. Rounding out this list, we have one of the coolest looking enemies in the entire Zelda franchise, the Igor. These ominous cyborgs have that edgy, humanoid vibe that the Pokemon company froth over. The Igor could be a poster child for the generation, appearing in Smash, selling merchandise, and getting a ridiculously good trading card. It would make for a difficult challenge to catch, appearing later in the game at a high level. It would tie into some key mythology and become an integral part of the story. But what type would best fit this monster? It shoots laser beams from its eyes, which feel very psychic or electric. Its flesh is purple and toxic to touch, like a poison type, but there's also mechanical elements that would suit a steel typing. Then again, Dark could work well with its enemy persona, as would fighting given it's a bipedal warrior. All things considered, I like fighting electric for typing. It's unique and allows the Igor to show the best of its talents. I would also give it an ability that bolsters its defenses against certain attacks to replicate how the Igor withstands anything that isn't a direct hit to its eye. However, I would still have special attack as its main stat, given that laser eye beam is deadly. And that's it, 5 Zelda enemies that would make fantastic Pokemon. Do you agree with these picks, or are there other enemies you would choose instead? Let me know in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing with a friend. If you want to see more on Zelda enemies, check out this video where I rank every mini-boss in Majora's Mask. But for now, I hope you stay safe, stay kind, and I'll catch you next time on the Hungry Heracross.